Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Happy Hour Sports. My name is Sam Madrigal, and this was a tough series loss, and history repeats itself 23 years later. As you know, the Orlando Magic this Sunday lost to the Detroit Pistons. Detroit Pistons came back down from a 3-1 lead. On Sunday, the Detroit Pistons won 116-94. Ran away with Game 7 in the second half. And history repeats itself from 2003. If you didn't know, the Magic were up 3-1 against the number one seed Detroit Pistons back in 2003. And Detroit Pistons came back and won that series as well. So 23 years later, history repeats itself. This was a tough series loss, a very frustrating loss, especially for the Magic. And now you go into an off season of uncertainty because there's a lot of big moves, a lot of big changes that are going to be coming Orlando's way. And the Magic had it. The Magic had this series. Even with, injuries were a part of this season's struggle, but there was also a lot of other factors, and we'll get into it. But they fought. The Magic did fight. But ultimately, in game 6 and part of game 5, towards the end, is where the whole turning point of this series came from. Especially after game 6. Game 6, the Magic should have won. They had the chance. They had the chance to close out the series. And ultimately, it just came down to the offense, which has been a big struggle, and who was going to step up in those games, because in game 7, a lot of Paolo ball, a lot of Paolo hero ball in game 7 here, and of someone like Paolo saved this team from the brink of elimination. And I saw that a lot in game 7 here. And that was kind of happening in game 6 as well, towards the end of that second half. So yeah, it was very, very difficult to watch. I mean, no one kind of stepped up to the plate in game 7 here, and it was all Paolo. Paolo finished with 38 points, 14 of 25, 9 rebounds, 6 assists, 5 turnovers. But like I said, Paolo was trying to do everything he can, and he can't do it alone. He can't. Someone else needs to step up. I mean, Desmond Bane, 16 points, 5 of 10 from shooting. A lot of those 10 shots came, or most of his shots came a little later on, but I think in the beginning he was like 3 of 6 in the first half. No one really kind of stepped up in game 7 here, and so it just led to a very rough start of the second half. I believe Detroit Pistons were up 11 at the half, and they ran away with it in the third quarter, went up by 20, and then Magic were able to cut it down to 14, I believe, in the fourth. But it just wasn't enough. Cade Cunningham played amazing. He's the one that really led the Detroit Pistons in coming back this whole series, and leading them to victory. Tobias Harris played a big part. He torched us in game 7, 30 points, 11 of 18 from the field, hit 5 of 7 threes. And this was Detroit's big shooting night. I mean, the Magic had a big shooting night on game 5, and unfortunately they just lost that. And Detroit, game 7 here, I mean, they were back home in Detroit, and they had a big shooting night. Tobias Harris, 30 points. Excuse me. Danish Jenkins, 16 points, 4 or 5 from three as well. Um, like it was just Detroit's, and the Magic, like game seven, anything could have happened. Anything could have happened. You know, they could have won this game. The Magic could have, but I think after that game six is what really changed the whole dynamic uh, of how this team went into game seven. And so it was very rough. It was very rough. The Pistons, they showed why they're the number one seed. They woke up. They showed their top three defense. They're like one of the best defensive teams. Um, so they showed that, and the Magic showed, they just fell apart in that defense. And the Magic's offense struggled against this number one seed Detroit defense. Um, and they just didn't have any way to crack the code on their defensive, on the Detroit's defensive end. Um, I think Franz could have been a big game changer for sure if he didn't have that calf strain. But it's still you've shown that you can win without Franz, and I think there's really no excuse. It's just who was going to step up with Paolo being out, or sorry, excuse me, with Franz being out. Um, and you could tell this is a very unsatisfied group of how things went out. This is the third season in a row of them exiting the first round of the playoffs. After they were in their first playoff series against the Cavaliers, um, they took them to 7, and they seemed like they had that confidence, and now like they have that experience to gain from and learn from. The second season they went last season when they played in Boston. Obviously, injuries were a huge factor last season, so that took a big toll. But this is a series that you should have won. That they definitely should have executed on and cleared out the Detroit Pistons. But now that's just, and this it's kind of showed with how this series has went from being up 3-1, just failing to execute, falling behind, and not being able and playing catch up, and then just someone not stepping up, and just a lot of the offensive scheme of this team just not working, finding open shots. It just led to the team's downfall, and that came down to a lot of, I think, confidence and just with how this season went. This team had a huge expectations this season. They were expected to be a 50-plus win team, and they did not meet those expectations. And I know a lot of Magic fans are probably happy with the season is over now, and also within making of this video, Mosley has been fired. Magic and Jamal Mosley have parted ways, and I'll make another video of that after this one goes out. But the Magic have a lot of work to do. The Magic have a lot of thinking, and Jeff Weltman, that front office, you got to figure out a coach that, and it's not just the coaching. It's not. It's the whole organization, really. But you need to figure out a way that is going to be a step in the right direction to be better next year. Because Magic fans are not going to be happy if it's the same exact thing next year. So they need to find something, and they have a lot of thinking to do. We got the draft, we got free agency coming up. You have a couple months to figure it out, and no one should be happy in this Magic organization about another first round loss. It's not good. It's not a good look. Um, I know Jalen Suggs. We'll kind of talk about players as well, but Jalen Suggs, I mean, he had a rough series. He had another series of where he shot, I believe, under 30% from three. You know, he's the heart and soul of the team, but he's not performing to the expectations that we want him to, and he's just been underperforming in the playoffs. Um, Magic just plain and clear. We've always struggled offensively, but the Magic just don't score enough points. They don't, and that's something that I need to figure out. Um, and really, Franz. I mean, I know he was injured a lot this season, but he'll get healthy. And Paolo, he just really needs to get to work. He needs to really develop in the gym, and that's something that really needs to happen in this offseason. Apollo developing after another year of struggling and staying at the same he was last year. He has so much potential. He does. And also just with Jeff Weltman, with the Desmond Bain trade that he made last season, or sorry, this past off season, you got to figure out your roster. You need to bring in offensive guys. And I mean, I know there's been some talk about maybe Giannis coming to or trading Giannis to Orlando, but um, there's a lot of factors. There's a lot of what ifs. But everything offensively was difficult for this Magic team all season long, and especially in this series. Um, they just lost full connection when things ramped up. Um, they just could not score the ball consistently. You could afford one bad quarter, but if you have multiple bad quarters in that game, two or three quarters, you're gonna lose. And that's basically what happened to the Orlando Magic in Game 6 and Game 7 here, where the Magic just shot unwell. So now, Magic have a lot of thinking. They have a lot of deciding who's staying, who's going, because Jalen Suggs and Wendell Carter Jr. are probably going to be on the trade block. You got to figure out who you're gonna cut on this team. What space are you gonna make? Because honestly, this bench, it's gonna need an upgrade. It is going to need an upgrade moving on into the future. And I will say we want to thank Mosley for building a culture here in Orlando. I thought, he did great. He did great. He built a great culture. He built a lot of the players. Um, it just unfortunately wasn't enough to get over the hump and to get towards the second round, because this is another or this is his third first round playoff loss with the Magic. So what the Magic need to do is to now regain the trust of the fans, because there was so much expectation this season, and the players, the coaching, and the organization has let down the fans. And so now they have to figure out how to regain that trust again. And it's going to take time. And it's going to take building. And hopefully they can figure out a coach who can help develop players and get this team over that hump into the second round and further into the playoffs, Eastern Conference Finals, and eventually a championship. Because some of our main core, Paolo Banchero, Desmond Bain, Franz Wagner, they're on big contracts. And you can't keep a core like that forever. It's eventually going to come down to who's staying and who's going. So the Magic need to figure out quick. They have time, but I'm just saying they need to figure out quickly on what's going to get them to the next level. So yeah, the Magic, like I said, they didn't play the greatest in Game 7 here. 41% from the field, 33% from the three. Um, the Detroit Pistons were just getting a lot more extra possessions and offensive rebounds uh, than the Magic. And I don't think the Magic just weren't playing hard or anything. The Detroit just executed a lot better just defensively and offensively. Uh, and that Detroit just eventually came up on top. And rightfully so. They deserved to win the series, and now they go on to face the Cleveland Cavaliers in the second round. So, but that will be it for this episode of Happy Hour Sports. Um, don't worry though, there will be more content. I will be covering the NBA playoffs, the rest of the NBA playoffs. Um, I want to say thank you for tuning in though and watching this. We will be covering more of the Magic. We'll kind of keep up with kind of the off season as well, and there will be another video of talking about coaching and what the Magic just need to do moving forward. Who can possibly replace Mosley as well, and who would be probably a good fit. We know probably, as you know, Billy Donovan is probably a big name out there since he kind of stepped away from the Chicago Bulls organization. I know he's kind of a big name thrown out there right now, but we'll talk about it more in the next video. But like I said, thank you again for tuning into this episode of Happy Hour Sports with covering the Orlando Magic. And until next season, and towards the off season, we'll see how that goes, and there will definitely be more content on coming that. But thank you again. My name is Sam Madrigal, and thank you for tuning in to Happy Hour Sports.